Hook. They say sometimes the smallest gesture can change the course of a life. A kind word, a shared meal, or simply choosing to see someone others ignore. On an ordinary Sunday afternoon, a mother and her little girl offered a simple sandwich to a stranger in the park. What they didn't know was that this man carried 10 years of silence, guilt, and a story the world thought was buried forever. This is not just about loss. It's about the power of compassion to awaken a forgotten hero. Stay with me, and if this touches your heart, don't forget to follow and share your thoughts. The afternoon sunlight poured gently over Riverside Park, where laughter, running footsteps, and the faint rustle of leaves created a peaceful rhythm. Emily Richardson spread a blanket beneath the wide arms of the old oak tree, arranging a small picnic basket filled with sandwiches and fresh fruit. For her and Lily, her 7-year-old daughter, these Sunday afternoons were sacred, a time to disconnect from screens and the world's noise, and instead focus on each other. Lily twirled in the grass, her laughter carrying on the breeze, before plopping down beside her mother. Emily smiled, smoothing Lily's hair before unwrapping the food. Just as she laid out 2 cups of lemonade, her eyes drifted across the park to a figure sitting alone on a distant bench. He was an elderly man with silver hair, a rough beard, and clothes that bore the marks of long wear, faded but clean. His back was straight, yet his gaze seemed fixed far beyond the park, as if he were seeing something no one else could. Around him, a silent circle of avoidance formed. Parents tugged their children in different directions, joggers altered their routes, and whispers followed him like shadows. "Mommy," Lily's soft voice broke the silence, her little finger pointing toward the man. "Why is that man all by himself?" Emily hesitated, weighing her answer. She noticed he had nothing with him but a plastic water bottle refilled from the park fountain. No book, no boisson, no food, just himself and the stillness that clung to him. "I think," she said gently, "maybe he's hungry. Should we share our lunch?" Lily's eyes brightened with the innocence of a child untouched by prejudice. "Yes, we can give him the best sandwich." She immediately picked out the one she thought looked most delicious, her hands holding it carefully as though it were a gift. Emily rose, walking toward the man with quiet steps. Around her, disapproving eyes followed. A woman at a nearby picnic table shook her head, whispering something sharp to her husband. Another muttered about encouraging them. But Emily pressed on, her heart steady. "Excuse me, sir," she said softly, standing a respectful distance away. "My daughter and I brought more food than we can eat. Would you care to join us?" The man's eyes shifted toward her slowly. They were sharp, alert, but shadowed by something deeper, distance perhaps, or pain. For a moment he seemed to weigh her motives, his silence stretching into the space between them. Finally he gave a small nod. "We're just over there," Emily continued, gesturing toward the oak tree. "It's nothing fancy, just sandwiches and lemonade." He stood, moving with a surprising steadiness despite the years and hardships etched into his body. When he lowered himself onto the edge of their blanket, Emily introduced them. "I'm Emily, and this is Lily." The man acknowledged them with another slight nod, but gave no name. Emily didn't push. Lily, full of enthusiasm, held out her carefully chosen sandwich. He accepted it with both hands, treating it as though it were something sacred. He ate slowly, deliberately, taking small bites, and Emily noticed the way his eyes kept flicking to the edges of the park, scanning, always scanning. It was a movement she recognized from her cousin, who had returned from Afghanistan with habits he never unlearned. Nearby, judgment continued. A woman's voice rang out, dripping with disdain. "Can you believe she's letting her child near someone like that? What kind of mother?" Emily ignored it, pouring lemonade into an extra cup. Lily tugged at her sleeve, whispering, "Mommy, why does he look so sad?" Emily glanced at their silent guest. His hands trembled slightly as he lifted the sandwich, his shoulders tight with invisible weight. She answered softly, "Maybe because it's been a very long time since anyone sat with him. If you believe good people deserve to be remembered, then stay right here with us." When the man finished eating, he reached into his worn jacket and pulled out a folded piece of fabric. Emily leaned closer, recognizing faded embroidery. 4th Marine Recon Task Force Echo, surrounding an unfamiliar insignia. "My father was in the Marines," she said gently, hoping to bridge the silence. He never talked much about it. The man's eyes flickered, a quiet understanding crossing his face. His fingers traced the embroidery as though reconnecting with something buried deep. "I was there," he said at last, his voice rough from disuse. "Then I wasn't anymore." The cryptic words hung between them. Emily chose not to press further. Lily, with a child's innocent curiosity, pointed to a scar that crossed his wrist. "Did you get hurt?" Emily began to hush her, but the man gave a faint shake of his head. "Long time ago," he said, his voice softer now. "Sometimes the outside heals faster than the inside." A family passed by. The father slowed, phone in hand, pretending to snap a selfie with the park in the background. But Emily saw the truth. He was photographing them. Soon the man shared the picture with others, laughing as though mocking a scene. The elderly man noticed. His posture stiffened, his eyes retreating into that faraway distance again. He began folding the patch carefully, as if preparing to disappear once more. "Would you like some more lemonade before you go?" Emily offered, hoping to ease his discomfort. He accepted the cup with a faint nod. At that moment, a jogger ran past wearing a Marine Corps t-shirt. His stride faltered as he glanced at the patch in the man's hands. He did a double take, staring hard, then hurried away with sudden urgency. Emily thought nothing of it. She simply packed away the remains of their meal, unaware that her small act of kindness had set into motion something far larger than she could imagine. The man sat quietly for a moment longer, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a tiny wooden carving of a bird. He handed it to Lily, who held it with delight. "Thank you," he said it quietly, words that carried the weight of more than gratitude. Emily smiled, not realizing that this chance meeting beneath the oak tree was about to ripple far beyond the park, reaching places where silence had lasted for 10 long years. The quiet of Riverside Park began to dissolve into the ordinary hum of life again. Families gathered up their belongings, joggers continued their laps, and Lily skipped near the blanket with the small wooden bird clutched tightly in her hand. To Emily, it had been nothing more than an act of kindness, a reminder to her daughter that even the most overlooked souls deserve dignity. But far beyond the park, the ripples of their simple lunch had already spread. That evening, a post appeared in a private veterans group online. Staff Sergeant Marcus Williams, the jogger who had passed their picnic, had written a short message. "Possible sighting of Colonel Reed at Riverside Park. Not 100% certain, but the TF Echo patch was unmistakable. Anyone in Glendale able to confirm?" Attached was the grainy photograph taken by the mocking bystander, showing Emily, Lily, and the elderly man on the blanket. At first, the post was met with skepticism. Then comments had began pouring in. One retired general wrote, "My God, that's him. That's Jason Reed." Within minutes, the photo was no longer confined to a veterans forum. It had reached intelligence officers, analysts, and command desks at the highest levels of the military. Phones rang, encrypted channels lit up, and people who had spent years searching leaned forward in disbelief. Colonel Jason Reed. Once he had been one of the most respected officers in the Marine Corps, a man chosen to lead the 4th Marine Recon Task Force Echo into a classified operation in 2008. According to official records, he and his entire team had been killed in action. The mission, shrouded in secrecy, was reported as a catastrophic failure. But the truth, long buried, was different. Reed had survived. The operation had collapsed under circumstances so severe that few details ever escaped. Some said Reed had made a decision that saved lives at the cost of others. Some called it heroic. Others whispered it was a tragic mistake. Officially, he was cleared of wrongdoing. But guilt is not erased by paperwork, nor silence broken by medals. Unable to face the families of those who hadn't made it home, Reed walked away. He vanished from the life he knew, refusing even veterans' benefits that might reveal his presence. For a decade, he drifted from town to town, taking odd jobs, hiding in plain sight, carrying his scars in silence. He had become a ghost. Now, by nothing more than a sandwich offered by a child, his invisibility had ended. Back at the park, Emily noticed the man sitting a little straighter as he folded the Marine patch carefully, almost reverently, back into his jacket. Lily leaned against him without hesitation, clutching the tiny carved bird he had given her. "My father was in the Marines," Emily had said earlier, and she saw the way those words had flickered something alive in his eyes. He did not speak much, but his silence was heavy with things unsaid. His movements carried the weight of someone who had lived too long in shadows. As twilight began to stretch across the park, Emily gathered the last of the picnic things. The man reached into his pocket once more, pulling out a small piece of string tied around another carving, this one a star, worn smooth with years of handling. He placed it gently in Lily's hands. "For you," he said simply. His voice, though rough, carried sincerity that needed no explanation. Emily touched his arm lightly. "You've given her more than a gift today. You've given her a lesson she'll never forget." The man inclined his head in acknowledgement, but his eyes remained distant, haunted by memories that belonged to another time. Elsewhere, the debate about his identity raged. Intelligence analysts pulled up old photographs, running facial recognition software. Side-by-side images compared a young, decorated Colonel Reed with a grainy shot from Riverside Park. The match was undeniable. 10 years, one officer whispered. "We've been chasing shadows for 10 years, and it takes a school teacher in a park to find him." By dawn, the order had been given: locate and recover Colonel Jason Reed. Emily remained unaware of the storm gathering. To her, the man was simply a stranger who needed company. But even she noticed the way he lingered on the edges of departure, as if preparing to vanish again. "You don't have to leave yet," Emily offered quietly. He gave her a long look. In his eyes, there was gratitude but also resignation. "I never meant to be found," he murmured. "Sometimes," Emily replied, "being found is the only way to begin again." The words seemed to settle on him like a weight and a bomb all at once. He didn't respond, only pressed the carving of the bird more firmly into Lily's palm before rising to his feet. The sun slipped below the horizon. The park emptied. And in the quiet that followed, Emily gathered her daughter's hand, the wooden bird, and the sense that something greater than herself had passed through their lives. Unseen by her, the photograph of their picnic was already being studied in military offices across the country, dissected for proof, confirmed by generals, whispered about by analysts. The man who had become a ghost was now once again a name, a rank, a story unfinished. Colonel Jason Reed had been found, not by commandos, not by agents, but by a child's sandwich and a mother's compassion. The stage was set for his past to come crashing into the present, and for the silence of 10 years to be broken by the sound of helicopter rotors in the sky. The following Sunday began as calmly as the last. Riverside Park was alive with families, joggers, and children chasing kites across the grass. Emily and Lily returned to their familiar oak tree, a basket once again filled with homemade sandwiches and lemonade. The memory of the elderly man lingered in Emily's mind, though she didn't expect to see him again. Some encounters, she thought, were meant to be fleeting. But fate had other plans. At first, it was only a faint hum, like distant thunder. Then the sound grew louder, unmistakable, the heavy thrum of helicopter rotors cutting through the peaceful afternoon sky. Heads turned upward, children pointed, conversations stopped mid-sentence. The helicopter descended over the open field beside the park, its downdraft bending trees, scattering napkins, and sending hats tumbling. Panic rippled through the crowd as families grabbed their belongings and hurried away, shielding their children from the storm of dust and noise. Emily instinctively pulled Lily close, her heart pounding. "What's happening, Mommy?" Lily shouted over the roar. "I don't know, sweetheart," Emily replied, her eyes fixed on the unfolding scene. 4 uniformed soldiers leapt from the helicopter before it had fully touched down. They fanned out with swift precision, their eyes scanning the park with practiced intensity. Behind them, a 5th man stepped down, a figure in a pressed dress uniform, his chest gleaming with insignia that caught the sun. His bearing was unmistakable. Authority, discipline, command. Emily followed their gaze and saw him, the elderly man. He was no longer just a quiet figure on a park bench. He had risen to his feet, his shoulders squared, his chin lifted. The years seemed to fall from him in an instant. The officer approached him directly, stopping at a precise distance before snapping a crisp salute. His voice carried across the park, firm and unmistakable. "Colonel Jason Reed, sir. Lieutenant Colonel David Hayes, Marine Special Operations Command. Permission to escort you home." Gasps rippled through the few onlookers who hadn't fled. Emily felt her breath catch. Colonel Jason Reed, The man she and Lily had shared sandwiches with was no nameless drifter. He was someone the world thought gone forever. Reed's transformation was striking. Moments before he had been weathered, distant, nearly invisible. Now he stood tall, his eyes sharp, his presence commanding. His voice when he spoke was steadier than Emily had ever heard. I assumed no one was still looking. 10 years, sir, Hayes replied with the quiet conviction. We never stopped. From the helicopter, another figure emerged. He walked with a pronounced limp, dressed in civilian clothes, but every line of his posture spoke of military discipline. As he approached, his composure wavered, his voice breaking with emotion. Jason, he said, tears edging his words. We thought we lost you for good. Reed's voice faltered as he responded. General Ryder. But Ryder shook his head. Not here as your superior, Jason. I'm here as the father of Captain Michael Ryder, the last man you saved before the extraction failed. Silence settled over the park, broken only by the helicopter's idling roar. Understanding dawned in Emily's mind. The man with whom she had shared lunch wasn't just a veteran. He was a soldier burdened by the weight of a mission that had cost lives and left families waiting for answers. Two soldiers stepped forward toward Emily and Lily. Ma'am, one said respectfully, his voice steady despite the surreal scene. Your kindness today accomplished what military intelligence couldn't achieve in 10 years. Emily shook her head quickly. I didn't do anything special. We just shared a meal. The soldier met her eyes firmly. You saw him, really saw him, when the rest of the world was looking past him. That matters more than you know. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes turned to her as well. Reed has carried guilt and silence for far too long. 8 families have lived 10 years without knowing the truth of their loved ones' last moments. He is the only one who can give them closure. Emily felt Lily clutch her hand tighter, her small fingers squeezing as if sensing the gravity of what was happening. Reed's eyes softened as he looked at them one last time. He took a step closer, his voice quieter now, meant only for them. Thank you, he said, the words heavy with meaning, for reminding me I'm still human. Emily nodded, tears prickling at her eyes. You were never less than that. Reed turned back toward the waiting soldiers. The helicopter's blades whipped the air into a frenzy as he stepped forward, his posture once again that of the leader he had once been. General Ryder clasped his arm with both hands, the gesture more personal than formal. As Reed boarded the helicopter, Emily lifted Lily into her arms, holding her close. The machine rose with a deafening roar, lifting Reed into the sky, back into the world he had abandoned. Around them, the few who remained stood frozen in disbelief. The woman who had once whispered harsh judgments about Emily's choice to share a meal with a stranger now approached, her face pale. I'm sorry for what I said, she stammered. I assumed. Emily's voice was calm but firm. We all make assumptions. It's seeing beyond them that matters. As the Black Hawk disappeared into the horizon, Emily realized the park would never feel the same again. What had begun as a simple picnic had become something extraordinary. The moment a forgotten soldier was finally seen, reclaimed, and brought home. And for the first time in a decade, Colonel Jason Reed was no longer a ghost. In the days that followed, news of the dramatic helicopter extraction spread like wildfire across Glendale. Witnesses recounted the thunder of rotors, the soldiers in formation, the salute exchanged with a man thought long dead. Reporters camped outside Emily's home, eager for interviews, eager to claim the first exclusive. But Emily refused them all. This isn't my story to tell, she explained calmly to every request. I was simply there when someone needed a friend. The headlines shifted quickly, focusing not on her, but on the man the world had nearly forgotten, Colonel Jason Reed. Within a week, a private ceremony was held at Quantico. Families of the task force Echo soldiers gathered, some with tears, others with questions that had festered for 10 years. For the first time, Reed stood before them, not as a decorated officer, not as a ghost, but as a man determined to face what he had long run from. He told the truth. He gave them what they needed most, the final details of how their sons, brothers, and fathers had lived and died. The accounts were painful. The silence he broke was heavy. But in his honesty, the families found a measure of peace. Reed, though still carrying the scars of guilt, had taken the first step back into himself. A few days later, Emily opened her mailbox to find a letter bearing the seal of the Marine Corps. Inside was a formal note thanking her for embodying compassion and humanity, values that, the letter said, represented the highest ideals of the nation. Enclosed was a second letter, handwritten by General Ryder himself. You reminded a broken warrior that he was still worthy of kindness. In doing so, you helped bring peace to 8 grieving families. Never underestimate the power of what you did. One small act can echo further than you can imagine. Emily held the letter with trembling hands, her heart swelling with the quiet emotion. She folded it carefully and placed it in a small box where she kept Lily's keepsakes. Some mementos, she thought, deserved to be preserved for a lifetime. The following Sunday, when Emily and Lily returned to their oak tree, they discovered something new. Near their familiar picnic spot stood a freshly installed bench. Upon its back was a small bronze plaque that read, "The Kindness Bench," where a mother taught her daughter the right thing to do. Emily's throat tightened as she traced the letters with her fingers. Around the bench, a newly erected American flag fluttered gently in the spring breeze. "This is for you, Mommy," Lily said cheerfully, climbing onto the bench and patting the space beside her. Emily smiled through her tears. "No, sweetheart, this is for all of us." That afternoon passed without helicopters or soldiers, but something had changed. Emily noticed how differently people were using the park now. The bench seemed to extend a silent invitation. An elderly woman sat beside a young man clearly battling addiction, speaking gently to him. A businessman in a sharp suit paused, sitting beside a woman pushing a cart of meager possessions. Barriers that had once separated strangers seemed to soften, if only for a while. It was as though the park had remembered what Emily had always believed: kindness is contagious. Later that week, a courier delivered another envelope. Inside was a letter written in a careful, steady hand. "For 10 years, no one truly saw me. I became invisible by choice, convinced I deserved nothing better. Then, on an ordinary Sunday, someone offered not just food but dignity, the simple acknowledgement that I remain human despite everything. Sometimes salvation comes not from grand gestures, but from an extra sandwich and a place at the table. You reminded me who I was when I had determined to forget. For that, there is no adequate thanks." Signed, A Grateful Marine. Alongside the letter was a small silver charm shaped like an oak leaf, polished until it gleamed. Emily clasped it to Lily's bracelet that evening. "What does it mean, Mommy?" Lily asked, turning her wrist to admire it. Emily smiled softly. "It means that sometimes the bravest people don't wear uniforms anymore, but they still deserve to be remembered." As weeks passed, the story of Colonel Jason Reed faded from the headlines, replaced by other events, other dramas. But in Glendale, the oak tree and the kindness bench remained, quiet reminders of a truth that would never fade. Some heroes don't need introduction or fanfare. Some wounds don't heal with medals or speeches. And sometimes the most extraordinary acts come not from battlefields or governments, but from a mother teaching her daughter the power of seeing someone others choose to ignore. Emily watched Lily play in the grass, the silver charm catching the light. She thought of Reed, of the families who had found peace, of the strangers now sitting together on that bench. She realized that what had begun as a sandwich shared beneath an oak tree had become something far greater, a lesson carried forward. And when Lily asked again, "Mommy, do you think we'll see him someday?" Emily wrapped her arm around her daughter and answered with quiet certainty, "Maybe, but whether we do or not, we'll always carry him with us, because kindness never disappears. It grows." The breeze carried the sound of children's laughter. The flag rippled above the bench, and the oak tree stood tall, its leaves whispering the truth. Compassion, even in its smallest form, can heal the deepest wounds. Sometimes the bravest choice is not to walk away, but to sit down beside someone who has been forgotten. And sometimes the greatest battles are won not with weapons, but with a shared meal and the courage to care.